Have you ever walked into a store and felt the weight of eyes judging whether you belonged? Now imagine being 68 years old, successful beyond measure, yet still treated as if your very presence was a crime. That's exactly what happened to Evelyn Carter, a black businesswoman who came face to face with prejudice in the middle of Manhattan's luxury district. In a single moment, a store manager's hand struck her cheek, and the world seemed to pause. But what no one in that boutique realized was that Evelyn carried more power in her quiet dignity than they could ever imagine. What would you do if someone tried to strip away your worth in front of strangers? Would you shrink in silence? Or would you rise, holding not just your own dignity, but the dignity of everyone who's ever been overlooked? This is not just a story about an insult. It's about a choice between cruelty and compassion, arrogance and accountability, silence and justice. Stay with me and ask yourself, if you were Evelyn, what would you have done before we begin? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because stories like this remind us all what true strength looks like. The late afternoon sun stretched long shadows down Fifth Avenue. Outside, the street was alive with the hum of taxis, the rhythm of hurried footsteps, and the soft sound of saxophone notes from a street musician playing for tourists. Inside the Regency Fashion Boutique, however, time felt suspended in polished glass, marble floors, and the soft rustle of silk. At first glance, the boutique was a temple of exclusivity. Hermes scarves draped over crystal stands, handbags perched like relics in museum displays, and perfumes floating on the air as if carefully orchestrated. This was the kind of place where whispers carried more weight than shouts, where price tags weren't just numbers, but statements of power. It was into this curated silence that Evelyn Carter stepped. 68 years old, dressed in a modest navy cardigan and sensible shoes. She carried herself with a grace that did not beg for attention, but quietly demanded respect. Her skin, weathered by time, yet luminous with dignity, bore the story of generations who had endured more than most would ever know. In her hand, she held her purse close, not with fear, but simply out of habit, one she had developed after decades of being watched, doubted, questioned in spaces like this. Evelyn walked slowly toward a display where a handbag rested on a pedestal of glass. It was a $3, $200 Hermes tote, caramel leather with precise stitching, a symbol of wealth to some, of artistry to others. She reached out gently, running her fingers along the smooth handle, studying the workmanship with quiet admiration. That was when Brian Cooper, the store manager, appeared. He had been watching her since she entered, his eyes sharp, filled with suspicion that had nothing to do with her actions and everything to do with who she was. Tall, mid-40s, his suit tailored, but his posture careless. Brian carried the smug confidence of a man who believed he was gatekeeper of this world. His voice cut through the boutique stillness like a blade. "Get your dirty hands off that purse. People like you don't shop here. You steal." For a moment, the room froze. Shoppers turned, sales associates stiffened, and Evelyn, caught between disbelief and a lifetime of too many moments like this, lifted her eyes slowly to meet his. Before she could respond, before she could even breathe in fully, Brian's open palm swung across her face. The slap cracked through the boutique, louder than it had any right to be. Evelyn staggered back. Her cardigan caught the edge of a crystal display, nearly toppling it. The handbag slipped from her hand and thudded against the floor, followed by the scatter of her belongings, reading glasses, a slim leather wallet, a phone buzzing with unanswered calls, and a small stack of business cards that slid across the marble like fallen leaves. Gasps erupted. Someone muttered, "Oh my God!" Another clutched their pearls, yet no one moved. Brian stood over her, chest heaving, his voice dripping venom. "Worthless old thief! He kicked her watch across the floor. It skidded beneath a rack of silk scarves, her Philippe Patek, a gift she had worn for decades, tossed aside as if it were counterfeit. On her knees, Evelyn reached a trembling hand to her lip. Blood stained her fingers, bright against the deep brown of her skin. She stared at it for a moment, her breath steadying, her voice emerging not with the anger expected, but with a calm that startled even herself. "Are you absolutely certain," she whispered, her tone deliberate, "that this is the decision you want to make? Have you ever watched someone destroy their entire world in a single moment of hatred?" The words floated into the heavy silence like a warning bell. Across the boutique, a teenager, Maya Torres, 19, who had been filming a light-hearted makeup tutorial moments earlier, lifted her phone higher. Her live stream shifted instantly, from lip gloss swatches to raw injustice. "Oh my God," Maya whispered into her mic. This manager just slapped an elderly black woman. Her screen count ticked upward. 12 viewers, 43, 189, 300. The number kept climbing. Comments poured in. "Call the cops. This is racism, protector." Evelyn did not yet notice the camera. She was gathering her belongings one by one, each movement methodical, almost ritualistic. She slid her boarding pass back into her cardigan pocket, folded her glasses, reached for the watch that had rolled beneath silk scarves. All the while, Brian loomed, arms crossed, his voice carrying across the boutique. "You all saw her. She was trying to steal. These people always think they can get away with it." His words, "these people," hung like poison in the air. A woman nearby, middle-aged and elegantly dressed, clutched her pearls tighter and added her cruelty. "I wondered why she was even in here," she murmured loudly enough to be heard. "They should check her bag." Evelyn paused, her hand stilling over her wallet. She had heard those words her entire life, in banks, in boardrooms, in restaurants where she was mistaken for help. But something inside her shifted now, not with resignation, but with clarity. From the floor, she lifted her black American Express Centurion card. It gleamed under the boutique lights. She held it calmly, without triumph, simply as fact. But before she could tuck it back into her wallet, Lisa Howard, the assistant manager, swooped in. She snatched the card from Evelyn's hand, inspecting it with theatrical disbelief. "Right," Lisa laughed, her tone sharp and mocking, like you could afford this, probably stolen too. The room buzzed. Phones were out now, not just Maya's, but others. Shoppers raised cameras like shields, documenting what their conscience could not stop. Evelyn's lip throbbed, her cheek burned, but her voice remained steady, almost unsettling in its composure. "I haven't stolen anything," she said quietly, her gaze fixed on Lisa's trembling hands holding the card. Online, Maya's viewer count surged past 5,000. Hashtags were forming in real time. Justice for Evelyn, Regency racism, and Evelyn Carter, unknown to them yet as the billionaire CEO of Carter Global Holdings, knelt on the cold marble floor of a boutique she partially owned, bleeding, humiliated, but unbroken. Her silence was not weakness. It was the weight of patience, of someone who knew storms had a way of clearing skies. The slap had started a story. The world was already watching. The boutique had never felt so still. The slap still echoed in the marble, but now it was replaced by something heavier silence. Not silence of peace, but silence of complicity. Silence that pressed down on everyone's shoulders like a weight. The smell of perfume and leather hung in the air, but it was mixed now with the metallic tang of Evelyn Carter's blood. Shoppers shifted uneasily. Some stared with wide eyes. Some deliberately looked away, pretending to browse racks of silk dresses as if refusing to witness what had just unfolded 2 feet from them. A couple whispered to each other, but lowered their voices whenever Evelyn's gaze met theirs. No one intervened. Not yet. Evelyn, still kneeling, gathered her belongings with deliberate care. She wiped the corner of her mouth with a tissue, folding it neatly before slipping it into her pocket. She adjusted her cardigan, straightened her posture, and rose slowly to her feet. Her dignity remained intact even though her cheek was red, her lip cut, and her card stolen from her hand. It was Lisa Howard, the assistant manager, who broke the silence. She held Evelyn's Centurion card up as if it were a piece of evidence in a trial. Her laugh was sharp, brittle, meant to sting. "Do you all see this, a black elderly woman walking around with a black card, please? This is as fake as her story." A few customers chuckled nervously, not because it was funny, but because fear and bias often disguise themselves as laughter. Brian Cooper, emboldened by the assistant's sneer, stepped forward. He pointed at Evelyn's modest purse lying open on the counter. "Check her bag," he ordered, voice commanding. "She probably has half the store stuffed inside." People like this don't walk out with receipts. They walk out with excuses. The phrase "people like this" landed in the room with a thud. Every black customer who had ever been followed in a store, every immigrant who had ever been side-eyed, every working mother who had ever been questioned for using food stamps, it all lived inside those words. And Evelyn Carter, a woman who had survived decades of corporate boardrooms, felt the sting as if it were her first time. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her purse, not out of guilt, but out of the crushing weight of humiliation. She hesitated. Should she unzip it? Should she submit to their baseless suspicion, or should she resist, stand tall, and risk further escalation? Inside, her thoughts whispered, "How many times will they strip away our dignity before enough is enough? I am tired. Tired of carrying patience like armor. But not today. Not in front of these children watching. Not when the whole world is finally paying attention." She let go of the purse. Her voice, when it came, was steady and soft. "You don't need to check my bag. There is nothing in there but my wallet, a pair of glasses, and a boarding pass." Lisa smirked, shaking her head. Convenient answer. She waved the card in the air. "The police will want to hear this." Across the boutique, Maya Torres' live stream was exploding from a shaky corner near the shoe display. She held her phone steady, capturing every cruel word. Her audience had grown to nearly 25,000 viewers. The comments scrolled faster than she could read them. "They're racially profiling her. Period. I can't believe this is happening in 2025. Somebody step in, call NYPD Internal Affairs. Protect this woman. She looks like my grandma." Maya's hands trembled. Her voice cracked as she spoke into the mic. "Everyone watching, this is Fifth Avenue. This is real. That manager slapped her. They're accusing her of theft without even checking the facts." The camera caught Evelyn standing still, regal, even in pain. She was not pleading, not yelling, just present. One man finally spoke up. David Miller, a middle-aged lawyer in a gray overcoat, had been browsing cufflinks near the register. He stepped forward, voice sharp. "Enough," he said firmly. "You assaulted this woman in front of witnesses. You cannot accuse her without proof." Brian turned on him. "Sir, I'm protecting our merchandise. If you have a problem with that, maybe you should shop elsewhere." David didn't flinch. He pointed toward the live streaming phones. "You see all those cameras you've just broadcast your own career suicide? Keep talking." The crowd stirred. Some customers began murmuring their agreement. But Brian only grew louder, his face flushed red with anger. "I know what I saw," he barked. "She doesn't belong here." His words landed like a gavel. That phrase, "she doesn't belong here," summed up the silent creed of so many institutions. It wasn't about theft. It was about worthiness. It was about who was allowed to exist in spaces built on exclusion. Evelyn felt the sting of those words, but her eyes did not drop. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin. She thought of her mother, who once worked 3 jobs and still was denied service at a diner. She thought of the young interns she had mentored, who faced microaggressions daily in the corridors of power. She thought of every moment she had swallowed humiliation for the sake of moving forward, and in that moment, Evelyn Carter decided she would not swallow this, but she said nothing yet. Instead, she allowed the silence to stretch, to grow uncomfortable, to force those around her to confront the ugliness of what had just happened. The boutique's automatic doors whooshed open. 2 NYPD officers entered, their uniforms cutting across the tension. Brian rushed toward them like a man certain of victory. "Officers, thank God you're here," he said breathlessly. "This woman attempted theft. She's carrying a stolen credit card. I restrained her before she could leave." The lies rolled off his tongue, easily, rehearsed from years of believing authority would always side with him. The officers glanced at Evelyn. One of them, a tall woman with sharp eyes, noticed the cut on her lip. Her brows furrowed. "Is that true?" Ma'am Evelyn opened her mouth, but before she could speak, Lisa thrust the black card into the air. This is what she tried to pay with, obviously fake. The officer studied it briefly. "It looks real to me." Lisa scoffed. "Oh, please. Do you really think she has the money for this?" The word she again spat out like evidence. The tension in the boutique was unbearable. Evelyn inhaled slowly, feeling the weight of decision press against her chest. Should she reveal herself now? Should she unleash the truth of who she was? The billionaire owner of Carter Global Holdings, a woman whose investments touched every corner of the city. Not yet, she thought. Timing was everything. So she simply looked at the officer and said softly, "I have nothing to hide." Meanwhile, Maya's live stream soared to 50,000 viewers. The comments were a chorus of outrage. "Don't let them arrest her. This is assault, not theft. She's innocent." The world was watching, and Evelyn Carter, though she stood alone in that boutique, knew she was not alone anymore. By the time the officers stood inside the boutique, Maya Torres's live stream had already spun beyond anything she imagined. She had started with a shaky hand, whispering disbelief into her mic, but now her phone buzzed with notifications so fast she could barely keep track. Her view count jumped from hundreds to tens of thousands, then higher. She blinked at the number 73,000 live viewers. The comments rolled like a tidal wave. "This is assault." He hit her. "Where is the manager's badge? Fire him. Tag the news. Someone call Channel 7. Protect Evelyn. This is racism in real time." Maya swallowed hard. She wasn't just a witness anymore. She was a conduit for the world. She lifted her phone higher, steadying it with both hands. Every detail of the boutique, its crystal chandeliers, the smug tilt of Brian Cooper's chin, the bright smear of blood on Evelyn Carter's lip was broadcast to tens of thousands of strangers. Strangers who were quickly becoming allies. Brian, unaware of the storm brewing online, pressed his case with the officers. She was about to run. He lied, his fingers stabbing the air toward Evelyn. She grabbed that purse off the display. I stopped her before she made it out the door. Then she tried to use a stolen card. "You can see for yourself." Lisa Howard nodded furiously, thrusting the Centurion card at the taller officer. "We all know what these look like, but no way does a woman like her have one." The words hung bitterly in the air. A woman like her. The officer examined the card again. Her partner shifted uneasily, glancing between Evelyn and the angry manager. The situation could tip either way. Meanwhile, Evelyn stood silent, her eyes calm, but her chest rising and falling in deliberate breaths. Inside, her thoughts were not calm. "I've lived long enough to know silence can be mistaken for weakness. But I've also lived long enough to know the power of timing. Not yet. Wait for the truth to land where it cannot be ignored. Her hand brushed against her cardigan pocket where a business card pressed against her side. On it was her name in embossed gold: Evelyn Carter, chairwoman and CEO, Carter Global Holdings. With one motion, she could shatter their illusions, but something inside urged her to let the scene play longer. The world needed to see not just her power, but their cruelty. Across the boutique, David Miller stepped closer, his jaw tight. "Officers, I saw everything. That man slapped her. That's battery." "And that assistant manager?" He gestured sharply at Lisa, snatched her card. "They're the ones committing crimes here, not her." Brian's face turned red. "Mind your business." "This is my business," David replied, his voice measured. "I'm an attorney, and trust me, the lawsuit you're walking into will ruin you." The crowd stirred, emboldened. A woman in a red scarf whispered, "I saw him hit her too." A young man muttered, "This is messed up." Phones rose higher, documenting every second. Maya's live stream surged past 100,000 viewers. The comments screamed across the screen, "This video needs to go viral now. I'm tagging the New York Times. Call the ACLU. Well, this woman is someone's grandmother. Protect her." Maya's voice trembled as she spoke to her audience. "They're trying to frame her. You all saw the slap. Please share this. Don't let them bury her truth." And just like that, hashtags multiplied. Your justice for Evelyn trended on Twitter. Regency racism lit up Instagram. Screenshots flooded TikTok. Within minutes, national attention began to orbit the boutique. But inside, Evelyn Carter still stood alone, or so it seemed. Brian grew impatient with the officer's hesitation. He leaned in, his tone sharper. "Look, I run this store. I know when someone's up to no good. Are you really going to take her word over mine?" The officer with sharp eyes narrowed her gaze. "I'll take evidence over assumptions." Evelyn finally spoke. Her voice was low, steady, cutting through the noise with surgical precision. "Evidence is everywhere in this room," she said. She glanced at the raised phones, the live streams. "And it will not disappear just because you pretend it doesn't exist." The line rippled through the crowd. Some customers nodded. The officers exchanged a quick look, sensing the shift. Brian sneered. "You think you're clever, don't you?" He stepped closer, his breath sour with arrogance. "You think those people watching care about you? You're nothing. Just an old woman who wandered into the wrong store." Evelyn's eyes locked onto his. She did not flinch. She did not blink. But inside, her chest tightened. How many times have I heard those words? Wrong neighborhood, wrong office, wrong seat, always wrong. And yet, I have built empires while they tried to shut doors in my face. Her silence was its own defiance. Lisa's voice rose shrill, desperate. "Arrest her already. She's wasting everyone's time." The officer finally raised her hand, firm. "Enough. We'll need statements from all parties." Maya's phone buzzed with a notification. CNN Breaking News had just shared her live stream. Her knees nearly gave out. She whispered, "Oh my God," but kept filming. Her viewer count skyrocketed 180,000, then 220,000. Comment sections exploded. "This is Evelyn Carter, the CEO." "No way, that's her?" "Look up Carter Global Holdings. She's a billionaire. They just slapped and humiliated the owner of half their parent company's stock." Maya gasped, realization dawning. She whispered into her mic, "Wait, guys, is this true? Is this really her?" Evelyn heard the murmurs but kept her composure. She was not ready for the reveal. Not yet. Timing was everything, and the storm was still gathering. Brian, oblivious, barked orders to staff. "Samuel, call corporate. Tell them we caught a thief." At the far end of the boutique, Samuel Price, the The store director appeared at last. Older, balding, his tie crooked, he looked less cruel than Brian, but equally complicit. His expression wasn't outrage or concern, it was calculation. He scanned the cameras, the officers, Evelyn's wounded face, and his eyes flickered with fear. "Brian," Samuel muttered, tugging his sleeve. "This doesn't look good. It'll look fine when she's in cuffs." Brian snapped, but Samuel's gaze lingered on Evelyn's card, still in Lisa's hand. Something in his stomach twisted. He knew. He knew the Centurion wasn't fake. He knew that if she was who he suspected, this wasn't just a scandal, it was corporate suicide. Still, he said nothing. Fear of losing his job outweighed the courage to tell the truth. The crowd buzzed louder now. Customers argued among themselves. Some sided with Evelyn, others, blinded by bias, muttered about shoplifters. The boutique had become a courtroom, and the jury was the world outside, hundreds of thousands of people watching on their phones. Evelyn stood in the center, silent but steady, her hand brushing the gold-embossed card in her pocket again. "Not yet," she reminded herself. "Wait until they've fully revealed who they are. Then the truth will land heavier." The live stream passed 300,000 viewers. Comments screamed, "Reveal yourself." "Evelyn, tell them who you are. Shut this store down." But Evelyn Carter remained calm, even as her cheek throbbed, even as blood dried at the corner of her mouth. She had endured a lifetime of injustice. She knew that patience, wielded correctly, could be the sharpest blade. And as the officers began taking notes, as Maya's phone buzzed with relentless notifications, as the world leaned in closer to watch, Evelyn Carter made a choice. She would let them believe they had won for just a few minutes longer, because when the reveal came, it would not just clear her name, it would set fire to the very ground they stood on. The boutique pulsed with restless energy. Phones hovered in the air like lanterns in a storm, catching every detail. The officers scribbled notes. Brian Cooper paced like a caged animal. Lisa Howard clutched the card in her hand as if it were proof of her power. And Samuel Price hovered in the background, calculating outcomes. But Evelyn Carter stood still. The voices around her blurred into a low hum, like waves crashing distantly against a shore. She heard Brian's shouting, Lisa's laughter, Maya Torres whispering into her live stream, David Miller insisting on legal rights, but all of it receded for a moment. Inside, Evelyn felt the familiar weight. It wasn't just the sting on her cheek. It wasn't the blood drying at the corner of her mouth. It was the weight of years, decades of moments just like this one, woven into her life like scars beneath her skin. Her mind drifted. She was 15 again, standing in a department store with her mother in Birmingham, Alabama. Her mother had saved for months to buy a Sunday dress. When they finally picked one, the clerk refused to let her try it on. "We don't want her kind stretching the fabric," the woman had said. Evelyn had watched her mother fold the dress back gently, her face calm, her eyes filled with humiliation she refused to show. That night, her mother wept in silence, thinking Evelyn didn't hear. But Evelyn did, and she never forgot. She was 24, fresh out of graduate school, walking into her first bank meeting to secure funding for a small business. The banker shook her hand, glanced at her resume, then leaned back with a smile that was all dismissal. "You people never pay these loans back," he said. She walked out with her head high, but her heart ached for weeks. She was 36, sitting in a corporate boardroom, the only black woman at the table. She had made a presentation, charts lined with data, projections that promised profit. The room had gone quiet. Then one director chuckled. "You're very articulate," he said, as if it were surprising. Another murmured, "She's ambitious. Isn't she as though ambition were a sin?" Each memory pressed against her now as she stood in the boutique bleeding. Every scar reopened. Her hands trembled slightly, but she clasped them together, pressing palm against palm, grounding herself. She whispered in her thoughts, "I have carried this my whole life, and yet I have built something greater than all of them combined. I have walked into rooms that were never meant for me and claimed them as mine. I will not let one slap undo the dignity I have built." A sharp laugh from Lisa cut through her reverie. "She's not even saying anything. Oh, look at her. Guilty people always stay quiet." The crowd murmured. Some nodded, others frowned. The silence of bystanders had always been Evelyn's oldest enemy, the silence of those who knew better but feared speaking. Her mind drifted again, this time to her late husband, Daniel. He had been her greatest ally, her anchor. He used to tell her, "Evelyn, silence can be a weapon, but only if you hold it long enough for the other side to hear themselves." She almost smiled, even now, remembering him. His words wrapped around her like a shield. The live stream swelled. Maya whispered into her phone, "She's so calm. Look at her. She's not even fighting back. This is strength." Her viewers flooded comments. "She's incredible. Reminds me of my grandmother. Dignity in the middle of chaos." Evelyn breathed slowly. She wanted to speak. She wanted to reveal who she was, end this circus with a single truth. But her instincts told her something deeper was at stake. This moment wasn't about her wealth or her title. It was about every time people like Brian and Lisa had thought they could strip away dignity without consequence. If she revealed too soon, they would claim it was only her money that saved her. She wanted the world to see the truth before her name changed the script. Her gaze drifted toward Maya, a young girl, barely grown, trembling as she filmed. Evelyn thought of herself at that age, carrying books past jeers on the street, determined to study anyway. She thought of every young black woman who had ever been told she didn't belong, and she knew this moment had to mean more than personal vindication. It had to mean hope. Her eyes closed briefly. She whispered a prayer under her breath, so soft no one heard. "Lord, let this mean something." When she opened them, Brian was pacing again. His voice rose above the crowd. "She's stalling. Arrest her already." "This is ridiculous." The taller officer frowned. "Sir, we'll handle this. Stand back." Brian sneered but obeyed. His arrogance dripped from every movement. Evelyn studied him quietly. She recognized men like him. She had met them in every phase of her life, men who confused cruelty for authority, who believed their titles gave them power to demean others. They all carried the same fragile core fear of being exposed. Her cheek throbbed again. She touched it lightly, her fingers brushing the swelling. And suddenly she thought of her grandchildren. She pictured their bright faces, their innocent laughter. She wondered what they would feel if they saw this video. She wanted them to see her not as a victim, but as someone who stood tall even when struck down. The silence stretched. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Evelyn lifted her chin slightly, her voice emerging at last, soft but resonant. "You may take my card, you may raise your hand against me, but you cannot take my dignity. Not today. Not ever." The words rippled across the boutique. For the first time, even some of the skeptical customers turned their eyes downward. The officers exchanged glances. David Miller nodded firmly, his voice echoing hers. "That's right. You cannot take her dignity." Online, Maya's live stream erupted. The comments flooded chills. "She's powerful. This is history." Evelyn fell silent again, letting the weight of her words settle. Her heart pounded, but not from fear, from resolve. She thought once more of her late husband, of her mother, of every battle fought in silence. And she knew the years had prepared her for this moment. The weight of years was heavy, yes, but it was also the source of her strength. The boutique felt like a stage now, each second stretching, each breath holding the audience tighter. Phones hovered like spotlights. The hum of Fifth Avenue outside was gone, replaced by a silence charged with tension. Evelyn Carter stood tall, her cheek swollen, her lip cut, her hands steady at her sides. She had spoken once already, words that carried like a hymn through the air. Now. The crowd waited, unsure what would happen next, but sensing that something was coming. Brian Cooper, impatient with silence, barked again. "Why are we wasting time? Cuff her. She doesn't belong here." The taller officer raised her hand. "Sir, you'll need to step back. We haven't finished our assessment." Brian scoffed, muttering under his breath. But the sound carried weak cops, always taking the side of criminals. Lisa Howard still clutched the Centurion card, her fingers sweaty now. She held it high again, desperate to prove herself right. "Look at this thing. She can't even explain where she got it. Do your job already." That was when Evelyn finally moved, slowly, deliberately. She reached into her cardigan pocket. Her fingers brushed past the tissue stained with her blood, the folded glasses, the boarding pass. She withdrew a single object, a slim black leather wallet, worn at the edges, but elegant in its simplicity. From it, she drew out a card, not the Centurion, but something else. A business card. Gold-embossed letters caught the chandelier light. She held it between two fingers, not flaunting, just presenting. Her voice, calm and even, broke the silence. "Before you put those cuffs on me," she said, looking directly at the officers, "you should know who you're speaking to." She extended the card to the taller officer. The woman glanced down. The name glimmered. Evelyn Carter, chairwoman and CEO. Carter Global Holdings. A murmur rippled through the boutique. Someone whispered, "Wait, what?" Another said, "Carter Global. That's massive." The officer's eyes flickered up, cautious but alert. "Is this real?" Evelyn nodded once. "You can confirm it in less than a minute. Call corporate, check the shareholder registry, or simply Google my name. The truth isn't hiding." Maya Torres gasped audibly from behind her phone. Her live-stream chat exploded. "I knew it." "She's the CEO! Oh my God!" This just flipped everything. They slapped a billionaire, a black woman who owns half their parent company. Game over. Her view count jumped past 500,000. Notifications pinged non-stop CNN anchors, journalists, influencers, all tuning in. Brian laughed, loud and mocking, though the edges of his voice trembled. "Nice trick. Printing a fake business card doesn't make you anybody. You think I'll believe some old lady runs a Fortune 500 company, but Samuel Price," the store director, went pale. His eyes widened as recognition dawned. He whispered, almost to himself, Carter Global Holdings. God help us." Lisa's hands shook. The Centurion card suddenly felt hot in her grip, as if it were burning her skin. David Miller stepped closer, his tone sharp. "I told you. You assaulted a woman who outranks every single one of you in this building. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Evelyn remained steady. Her voice softened, but each word carried weight. "I didn't come here as a CEO. I came as a woman who wanted to browse quietly on a Thursday afternoon. But since you insist on seeing only what you want to see, now you will." Her eyes swept the boutique, settling on each face Brian's arrogance, Lisa's fear, Samuel's guilt, the customer's unease. "For too long," she continued, "people like you have believed you can decide who belongs and who does not. Today, the decision is no longer yours." The officer holding her card looked at Samuel. "Sir, is this true? Is she who she says she is?" Samuel's throat bobbed. Sweat beaded at his temples. He hesitated, torn between self-preservation and truth. At last, he nodded. Yes, she is. She owns a controlling interest in Regency Retail Group, the parent company of this store. The words detonated. Gasps rippled through the boutique. Customers exchanged shocked glances. Maya's live stream comments exploded. He just confirmed it. This is historic. I can't stop shaking. They literally slapped their own boss. Brian froze, his mouth opening but no words emerging. For the first time, his certainty faltered. Lisa dropped the Centurion card onto the counter as if it burned. Evelyn picked it up calmly, wiped it against her sleeve, and tucked it back into her wallet. She looked at Brian, then Lisa. "Do you understand what you've done?" she asked quietly. Brian tried to muster bravado. You can't just..." But his voice broke. Evelyn turned to the officers. "I will cooperate fully with your investigation, but you should also know this within the next 10 minutes. The CEO of Regency Retail Group will be on this phone." She tapped her cell gently. "And you will witness the consequences of choices made in arrogance," Maya whispered into her live stream, her voice trembling. She's not even raising her voice, and yet she's shaking this entire room. The crowd stood silent now, the balance of power shifting visibly. Customers who had sneered earlier looked down at the floor. Some mouthed apologies. None dared speak aloud. Samuel wiped his forehead with a trembling hand. "Ms. Carter, please, perhaps we can." But Evelyn cut him off gently. "No, you had a choice to act when you saw injustice. You chose silence, and silence is complicity." Brian's jaw tightened. He tried one last time to regain control. "You can't fire me. I'm the manager here." Evelyn's eyes held his, calm, steady, unblinking. "You were the manager. That ends tonight." Maya's live stream count passed 800,000. Hashtags flooded Twitter. News outlets scrambled for statements. Screens across the country flickered with Evelyn Carter's image, standing regal in a boutique that had tried to strip her dignity. The reveal was no longer a secret. It was a reckoning. The boutique was no longer just a store. It had become a theater, a courtroom, and a battlefield all at once. Every pair of eyes was fixed on Evelyn Carter. Her calm stood in contrast to the chaos swirling through the marble-floored boutique. The swelling on her cheek was real, the cut on her lip undeniable, but so was the authority radiating from her posture. Her phone buzzed. A name lit up the screen: Richard Blake, CEO of Regency Retail Group. The very top of the empire. She pressed accept and put the call on speaker. Her voice was even, measured. "Richard." The boutique held its breath. "Evelyn." His voice came sharp, urgent, carried through the speakers with the weight of a man watching his empire teeter. "I'm seeing the live stream. Are you safe? Do you need medical attention?" "I am safe," Evelyn replied, "but your store, your management team, and your brand are not." Samuel Price, the store director, flinched as though struck. Brian Cooper's hands twitched at his sides. Lisa Howard stared at the floor, pale and silent. "Tell me exactly what happened," Richard demanded. Evelyn did not raise her voice. She did not rush. Instead, she described it simply, factually. "Your store manager struck me across the face in front of 24 witnesses. Your assistant manager accused me of theft, seized my property, and called me worthless. Your director stood silent while customers joined the chorus of disdain. All of it has been recorded. All of it is now global." The murmurs among customers turned to gasps. Maya Torres's phone nearly shook in her hands as her viewer count pushed past 1.2 million. On the line. Richard's breath came heavy. "Dear God," Evelyn continued, "your empire now faces more than a lawsuit. It faces judgment in the court of public opinion, and I will not let this pass quietly." Brian found his voice, hoarse but defiant. You think you can ruin me because of one mistake? You're overreacting. Richard's roar came through the phone before Evelyn could reply. Who is that, Brian? Cooper? Evelyn answered. Your store manager. Brian Cooper, Richard repeated, his tone razor sharp. You are terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you once the officers finish their work. There will be no severance, no recommendation, no second chance. Brian staggered as if the ground had given way beneath him. He tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. You can't do this. I've given years to this company. Evelyn looked at him, calm as a still lake. Years do not erase cruelty. Loyalty does not excuse violence. Lisa Howard broke then, her voice trembling. Mr. Blake, please. I thought I was protecting the store. I thought Lisa Howard. Richard's voice cut like a blade. Yes, sir, she whispered. You seized a customer's property, mocked her, and ignored evidence of who she was. You are also terminated. Effective now. Lisa's knees buckled. She leaned against the counter, breath shallow, realizing her career had ended in real time before millions. Samuel Price, sweating, tried to step forward. Richard, please. Samuel. Richard interrupted, his voice lowered, heavy with disappointment. You had authority to stop this. You did nothing. That is complicity. You're finished. Samuel's head dropped. His shoulders slumped. Decades of ambition dissolved in seconds. Evelyn let the silence hang. The consequences had begun, but they were not complete. She knew the world was watching, and she had a duty beyond her own vindication. Richard, she said, this isn't about 3 individuals. This is about the culture your leadership has allowed. What happened here tonight was not an accident. It was systemic. And if you want this company to survive, change must be immediate, visible, and irreversible. Richard hesitated, then asked the only question left. What do you require? Evelyn's voice held no anger, now only clarity. Conviction. First, full public acknowledgement of this incident. No vague apologies. No corporate spin. You will name what happened: racial discrimination, physical assault, and managerial failure. Richard exhaled, but said nothing to stop her. Second, Evelyn continued, you will implement mandatory anti-bias training for all 47 of your stores within 30 days. Certification required. Anyone who fails, leaves. Maya's live stream comments lit up. Yes, she's rewriting the rules. This is bigger than one slap. This is history. Accountability in real time. Third, Evelyn said, her tone still steady. Install monitoring systems cameras, audio, AI review across every location to flag discriminatory conduct. Transparency will be the new standard. Fourth, hiring reform. Management must reflect diversity. 40% of leadership positions must be held by minorities within 18 months. Progress reports made public. Richard groaned quietly. That is monumental. That is survival, Evelyn corrected. She let the weight of her words settle. Customers leaned closer. Officers stood still. Maya held her breath. The whole room had become her boardroom. And finally, she said softly, you will establish a customer dignity fund, $5 million annually, directed to civil rights groups focused on retail discrimination, funded publicly, audited independently. The boutique hummed with stunned silence. Richard's voice cracked slightly. You're asking for a revolution? Evelyn smiled faintly. I am asking for justice. The choice is yours. Comply or watch your empire collapse. I control more than 60% of your corporate debt. Bankruptcy would take 72 hours. The customers gasped again. Even the officers exchanged wide-eyed looks. Brian slumped into a chair, defeated. Lisa wept silently. Samuel looked like a ghost of himself. Maya whispered into her phone, "I can't believe this is real. She's holding the company in her hands." On the other end, Richard sighed, the sound of a man who knew he had lost. "You'll have it. Everything you've asked for. Consider it done." Evelyn nodded once. "Good. Then begin with what your customers and the world deserve an apology in your own voice, right now." The boutique trembled with anticipation. A CEO, forced to his knees by truth and by one woman's quiet strength, was about to speak to millions, and Evelyn Carter stood steady, a living embodiment of dignity reclaimed. The boutique was silent, heavy like a courtroom just before a verdict. Every breath, every blink, every glance carried weight. Evelyn Carter stood in the middle of it all, her phone still on speaker, Richard Blake's voice hanging in the air. Maya Torres's live stream numbers had crossed 2 million. Comments flew across the screen faster than she could read history in the making. "This is bigger than one store. I'll never forget her face." The taller officer glanced at her partner, then at Evelyn. Both stood straighter now, as if realizing they weren't just witnesses to a petty retail dispute, but participants in something larger. Richard's voice returned, quieter than before, stripped of his earlier command. "Very well. Evelyn, you want an apology? You'll have it. But I'll warn you the moment I speak. The stock price will drop, the board will rage, and the press will swarm." Evelyn's answer was calm, resolute. Then, "Let them. The cost of silence will be far greater." Maya whispered into her phone, "She's about to make the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company apologize live. This is insane." The speaker crackled. Richard cleared his throat. The boutique leaned closer, as if the walls themselves wanted to listen. "My name is Richard Blake," he began, voice trembling but loud. "I am the CEO of Regency Retail Group, parent company of this store. Tonight, an act of racial discrimination and violence occurred inside one of our boutiques. A customer, Ms. Evelyn Carter, was profiled, accused, and physically assaulted by members of my management team. I am ashamed, and I take full responsibility." Gasps rippled across the boutique. Customers who had stood silent earlier shifted uncomfortably, realizing they had been complicit too. Some lowered their heads, others reached for their phones to record every syllable. Richard continued, "Effective immediately. The individuals responsible have been terminated. But this is not enough. Ms. Carter has demanded systemic reform, and she is correct. We will implement mandatory anti-bias training, independent monitoring, and leadership diversity goals across all 47 stores. Furthermore, we will establish a customer dignity fund to support organizations fighting retail discrimination nationwide." His voice faltered slightly, but he pressed on. "This is not charity. This is accountability. Tonight, we failed Ms. Carter. We failed our community. And for that, I am profoundly sorry." Silence followed, a deep, aching silence. Evelyn let it stretch. Her eyes swept the room. She saw Lisa Howard trembling, Brian Cooper slumped like a man hollowed out, Samuel Price staring at the floor. She saw the customers, some ashamed, some weeping quietly. And she saw Maya, her eyes wide, her hands shaking as she held her phone steady. Then Evelyn spoke, her tone still calm, still even. "Richard, the apology is a beginning. But remember, words without action are theater. You must prove tonight is not performance but transformation." Richard answered quickly, "It will be. I promise you." Evelyn nodded once. "We will see." Maya's live stream erupted. This gave me chills. She's rewriting history in real time. I want to be like her when I'm older. Accountability. Finally, the taller officer cleared her throat, stepping forward slightly. Ms. Carter, do you wish to press charges against Mr. Cooper for the assault? The room froze again. Brian looked up, his eyes wide with sudden fear. Evelyn studied him for a long moment. She thought of every bruise life had already given her, every insult borne in silence, every battle fought in rooms stacked against her. Her cheek still throbbed. She could have demanded prison. She could have asked for his life to crumble entirely. But instead, her voice softened. No. His termination and public disgrace will be punishment enough, but he will live with this on his name forever. That is a weight prison could never match. The officer nodded, respecting her choice. Brian collapsed back into his chair, defeated. Lisa sobbed quietly. Samuel wiped his face with trembling hands. Evelyn turned to the crowd. Her voice grew a touch louder, her eyes scanning each person. And to those of you who watched, who whispered, who said nothing, you are not innocent. Prejudice thrives on silence. If you want change, it begins not with applause when justice is done, but with courage in the moment it is denied. A woman in the back began to cry openly. A man near the register lowered his phone. Ashamed. The message had landed. Maya whispered into her stream, her voice cracking. She's not just speaking to them, she's speaking to all of us. The boutique felt like a church now, Evelyn's words, a sermon none would forget. Her phone buzzed again. Messages poured in from senators, journalists, civil rights leaders. The story had already gone national. By dawn, it would be international. Evelyn slid the phone into her pocket. She stood straight, dignified, unshaken, despite the bruise blooming on her cheek. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She simply existed as truth in human form, a reminder that power does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers, and the world bends to listen. The reckoning was complete, but the journey of reform was only beginning. By the time Evelyn Carter stepped out of the boutique, night had fallen over Fifth Avenue. The neon glow of the city painted the wet pavement in streaks of red and gold. Outside, a crowd had already gathered. Reporters pressed forward with microphones. Camera crews lit up the sidewalk, and pedestrians craned their necks just to see the woman at the center of the storm. The live stream had spilled into the streets. Screens across Times Square replayed clips, the slap, the reveal, the apology. Headlines scrolled in real time: CEO humiliated in racial profiling incident, Regency retail faces crisis. After assault on Evelyn Carter, dignity cannot be bought, says Carter. Evelyn's cheek throbbed, but she stood tall, her presence commanding. David Miller walked close by her side, shielding her from the most aggressive reporters. Maya Torres trailed behind, still clutching her phone, her audience holding steady at nearly 2.5 million. Ms. Carter. Ms. Carter voices shouted from every direction. Do you plan to sue? What do you say to the millions watching right now? Is this the end for Regency retail? Evelyn paused on the sidewalk. She turned to face the cameras, her calm cutting through the frenzy. I did not ask for this moment, she said, her voice steady, but I will not waste it. What happened inside that boutique is not rare. It happens to people of color every single day, unseen, unrecorded, unanswered. The difference tonight is that you all saw it, and now you cannot look away. The crowd hushed. Even the car horns in the distance seemed to fade. This is not about one slap. It is about the slap that echoes through generations. It is about the mother told she does not belong. The father followed through aisles. The child asked if she can afford what she holds in her hand. Tonight, Accountability began, but only began. What matters now is what comes next. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras zoomed in. Maya whispered into her live stream, her voice choked with emotion. She's turning this into something so much bigger. Evelyn raised her chin slightly. To those who watched silently in that boutique, to those who watch silently in their own lives, remember, silence is complicity. Speak. Stand. Do not let prejudice pass you by unchallenged. That is how change begins. Her words fell like rain on thirsty ground. Applause rose from the crowd, hesitant at first, then growing louder. David touched her arm gently. "We should get you to the car," he murmured. She nodded, stepping into the waiting black sedan. As the door closed, flashes lit up like fireworks, freezing her face against the darkened glass. Inside, the silence felt heavier. David exhaled. That was history. "Evelyn, you know that, right?" Evelyn looked out the window. Pedestrians' faces blurred past. She thought of her late husband, of her mother in that department store, of her grandchildren. "History," she said softly, "is only useful if it changes tomorrow." The ride was short, but her phone never stopped buzzing. Messages from senators, governors, CEOs, pastors, activists. Her assistant had left 27 voicemails. Cable news hosts begged for interviews. Civil rights organizations asked for partnership. When she arrived at her townhouse, a smaller crowd of neighbors stood waiting, candles in hand. They clapped quietly as she walked inside, offering words of support. Some had tears in their eyes. Evelyn closed the door behind her and leaned against it, suddenly weary. The strength she had carried all evening began to slip. For a moment, she felt the weight of it pressing down the bruise on her cheek, the exhaustion in her bones, the grief of a lifetime of battles. In the quiet, her phone buzzed again. A message from Richard Blake board meeting tomorrow. 9 sharp. Full compliance with your terms. Evelyn typed only 2 words, "I'll attend." She set the phone down, walked to the mirror in her hallway, and studied her reflection. The woman staring back at her was older, scarred, bruised but unbroken. Her voice, a whisper to herself, filled the silence. "They thought I was just another customer. They forgot I am every customer." Upstairs, she sat at her desk and opened her leather-bound journal, the one Daniel had given her years ago. She wrote, "Tonight, I was struck, but tonight, I struck back with truth. May this moment ripple wider than me, wider than this city, wider than this nation. May it reach every child who wonders if they belong, and may it tell them, yes, you do." Her hand trembled as she closed the book. She breathed deeply, letting the night settle. Tomorrow would bring more storms, but tonight she had reclaimed her dignity and planted the seeds of reform. In a small apartment across town, Maya Torres replayed the live stream again and again, her comments still flooding in hours after. She had started the night a teenager with a phone. She ended it as the voice of millions. And in corporate towers, boardrooms buzzed, investors demanded answers, lawyers drafted press releases, competitors watched with both fear and admiration. An old truth had resurfaced. Power is not only in profit margins, it is in principle. For Evelyn Carter, the aftermath was not an ending. It was the beginning of a war she had long prepared for, fought not with fists, but with presence, truth, and the unyielding demand for dignity. The world would never forget what had happened on Fifth Avenue that night, and neither would she. The next morning dawned gray over Manhattan. Clouds hung low, pressing against the skyline, as if the city itself anticipated a storm brewing inside its tallest towers. Evelyn Carter rose early. The swelling on her cheek had darkened overnight into a bruise the color of plum. She applied no makeup to hide it. The world had seen what happened. She would not erase it now. Her dark suit was simple, tailored, deliberate. Dignity was her armor. David Miller met her at the door of her townhouse, papers in hand. "The board is rattled," he said. "Half of them want Richard gone already. The other half are terrified of you." Evelyn gave the faintest smile. Fear is a beginning, but fear alone does not build change. The car carried them through crowded streets to Regency Retail Group's headquarters, a glass and steel tower that gleamed like cold authority. By the time they stepped into the marble lobby, whispers were already following them. Employees glanced up from their desks, phones buzzing with news alerts and stock updates. Evelyn walked straight ahead, her cane tapping softly against the stone. The boardroom was on the top floor, a cavernous space lined with windows overlooking the city. Around the massive oak table sat 12 directors, each with folders stacked before them, each face a mask of worry, pride, or resentment. Richard Blake stood at the head of the table, pale and worn from a sleepless night. "Evelyn," he began, his voice strained. "Thank you for coming." "I didn't come for thanks," Evelyn said calmly, taking a seat opposite him. "I came for accountability." The directors shifted uncomfortably. One cleared his throat. "With respect, Miss Carter, the situation has spiraled. Our stock fell 12% overnight. Media coverage is brutal. We need damage control." Damage control. Evelyn's gaze swept the table. "You mistake the wound for the infection. The wound is last night. The infection is the culture you have allowed to fester. If you treat only the wound, this company will die." Her words landed heavy. No one dared interrupt. Richard rubbed his temples. "Evelyn, I've already agreed to your conditions. Training, oversight, diversity, the Dignity Fund. What more do you want? What I want," Evelyn said softly, "is more than compliance. I want conviction." She leaned forward, her voice low but carrying. "Every one of you knew stories like mine existed. Maybe you didn't see them. Maybe you chose not to. But ignorance is not innocence. If you want Regency to survive, then today is not about me. It is about whether you will finally look at yourselves and admit the truth." Silence. Some directors lowered their eyes. Others bristled, unwilling to yield. One, a gray-haired man with a pinched expression, spoke up. "Ms. Carter, with respect, this company was built on tradition. Our clientele expects a certain image, a certain standard. If we change too much, we risk alienating our base." Evelyn's eyes sharpened. "Your base is humanity. If you believe dignity threatens profit, then you misunderstand both. Do you think the world applauds cruelty? Do you think customers will stay loyal to a brand that treats them as less than? Look outside this room, the world has already judged you." The director shifted uncomfortably. Evelyn let the moment linger before continuing. "Tradition without justice is decay. Standard without humanity is rot. If you wish to cling to them, you will not only lose your customers, you will lose me." Her last words struck like a hammer. Gasps circled the table. "You would withdraw your holdings?" another director asked. Evelyn's gaze was steady. "I own 67% of your debt instruments. If I call them, bankruptcy will come in 72 hours. Do you wish to gamble?" The room broke into murmurs. Fear rippled like a current. Richard raised a hand for silence, his face ashen. "Evelyn," he said, voice hushed. "Please, what is it you want from us right now? In this room, I want truth," she replied. "Each of you must decide whether you stand for transformation or for complicity. Not later, not in press releases, but now. Speak it aloud." The room stiffened. It was a demand no one expected, not just signatures on paper, but confessions of conscience. The first to speak was a woman near the end of the table, her voice firm. "I stand for transformation. What I saw last night shamed me. We cannot continue as we are." Another followed. "I agree. It's time. But not all." A man in a Navy suit shook his head. "This is madness. You'll destroy shareholder value chasing social experiments." Evelyn turned to him. Her voice was not angry, but almost sorrowful. "And what value remains when reputation collapses, when your stores are empty, when your children ask you why you chose profit over people? What will you tell them?" His mouth opened, then closed. He looked away. One by one, the directors spoke, some with conviction, some reluctantly, but the tide had turned. By the end, 10 voices stood for change. 2 remained silent. Richard cleared his throat. "The board has spoken. We will move forward with Ms. Carter's reforms, effective immediately. The Dorothy Carter Protocol will be enacted." The room stirred. The name carried weight, dignity enshrined into policy. Evelyn leaned back, her body weary, but her spirit unshaken. She had forced not only promises, but a declaration written into the company's history. David leaned toward her and whispered, "You did it." Evelyn's eyes drifted to the windows, the city sprawling below. "No," she murmured. "We only began. The real work starts when the cameras turn away." The boardroom sat in stunned silence, knowing they had witnessed not just a meeting, but a moment that would echo far beyond their walls. Weeks passed, yet the memory of that night on Fifth Avenue refused to fade. The footage still circled across social media, edited into highlight reels, quoted in sermons, played in classrooms. Hashtags trended, news panels debated, and ordinary people whispered Evelyn Carter's name in barbershops, office kitchens, subway rides. For Evelyn, life carried on. But not as before. Her townhouse filled daily with flowers, letters, and cards, some from strangers, others from civil rights leaders, CEOs, even children who scrawled with crayons. "Thank you for being brave." She read them at night, her heart both heavy and full. Maya Torres visited often. What began as a live stream had transformed her life overnight. Colleges reached out, non-profits offered internships, and networks asked her to host youth programs. Yet whenever she came to Evelyn's townhouse, she was just Maya again, still wide-eyed, still learning. One evening, Maya sat across from Evelyn at the kitchen table, phone tucked away for once. "Do you ever regret it? Not pressing charges, not crushing them harder?" Evelyn stirred her tea slowly. The bruise on her cheek had faded into a faint shadow, but the memory remained clear. "No," she said softly. "Prison breaks a man's body, but truth breaks his mask. They'll live every day with the knowledge that their downfall was their own doing. That is punishment enough." Maya nodded slowly. "I think people needed to see you choose that. Mercy." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Mercy is not weakness, child. It is power given form." The next morning brought the press conference. Regency Retail Group unveiled sweeping reforms, the Dorothy Carter Protocol, full diversity audits, mandatory training, independent oversight, and the $5 million annual Customer Dignity Fund. Richard Blake stood beside Evelyn as cameras flashed. His words, though rehearsed, carried sincerity forged by humiliation. "Our company failed," he admitted. "We failed Evelyn Carter, and in doing so, we failed every customer who has ever felt unseen. But we will not fail again." Reporters turned their mics to Evelyn. Her voice was calm, unhurried. "This is not my victory. This is not even about me. This is about every person who has ever walked into a store and been told with eyes or words that they did not belong. Tonight, we remind them they do. Applause broke, not just in the press room, but across living rooms watching live. Later that week, Evelyn visited a community center in Harlem. Children ran up to hug her, elders clasped her hands, pastors prayed over her. She moved quietly among them, listening more than speaking. One grandmother whispered through tears, "You stood for us all." Evelyn squeezed her hand. "I only stood because I was carried by those before me. Now we carry each other." The Dignity Fund launched within a month. Grants flowed to grassroots groups tackling retail discrimination, supporting minority-owned businesses, and funding scholarships. Stories emerged: a young black woman opening her own boutique, a Latino family securing fair loans for expansion, a group of students filming bias awareness campaigns. Each traced its roots back to that night on Fifth Avenue. But Evelyn never let herself be painted as a saint. In interviews, she reminded audiences, "I am not perfect. I am not invincible. I am a woman who was humiliated and chose to turn that pain outward so it might heal others. Anyone can do the same." At home, her grandchildren often climbed into her lap, asking to watch Grandma's speech on YouTube again. She laughed gently, kissing their curls. "Not because I was brave," she told them, "but because you must be. The world will test you, but never let it take your dignity." David Miller remained by her side, guiding legal reforms that spread beyond Regency. Legislators introduced bills requiring retail bias audits nationwide. Other corporations scrambled to copy the Carter Protocol, not out of goodwill alone, but fear of being the next scandal. Change was messy, uneven, but visible. One night, sitting by the window with a blanket around her shoulders, Evelyn opened her journal again. She wrote, "It began with a slap, but it ends with a seed planted in millions of hearts, watered by truth, tended by justice. Perhaps one day my grandchildren will walk into any store, any room, and see only welcome. Until then, we walk on." She closed the book and let her gaze drift over the skyline. The bruise was gone, but its lesson remained carved into her spirit. Maya's star rose, but she never forgot her mentor. Years later, when she addressed a hall of young activists, she quoted Evelyn's words, "Mercy is not weakness. It is power given form." And so the story lived on, not as a scandal, not as a viral clip, but as a legacy. A reminder that dignity, once defended, can ripple through generations. Evelyn Carter did not set out to become a symbol. She set out to buy a dress. But when the world tried to strip her of her humanity, she answered not with rage alone, but with resolve, vision, and grace. In the end, her greatest victory was not firing a management team or rewriting corporate policy or humbling a CEO. It was reminding millions of people in stores and streets and homes across America of a truth too easily forgotten. Dignity belongs to us all, and no one, not a manager, not a company, not a system, can take it away. The story of Evelyn Carter carries lessons that reach far beyond one night in a boutique. It reminds us that dignity is not something handed to us by society. It is something we already carry within. Age, race, or appearance should never determine how much respect we deserve. Yet prejudice often blinds people, and when unchecked, it can destroy careers, reputations, even entire companies. For older viewers, there is comfort and empowerment here. Evelyn shows us that it's never too late to stand tall, to confront injustice with calm resolve. Strength does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers with quiet authority, choosing truth over anger and grace over vengeance. Her actions also teach us about accountability. Leaders are measured not by titles, but by how they treat the most vulnerable person in the room. And for all of us, there's a call to courage to speak up when we witness unfairness, to protect the dignity of others as fiercely as our own. At its heart, this story says one thing clearly. Respect should never be conditional. Justice may be delayed, but it does not have to be denied. Thank you so much for spending your time with this story. If Evelyn's journey touched you, if it made you think about dignity, respect, and the power of standing firm, we invite you to keep this conversation alive.
Please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that shine a light on truth, justice, and hope.